this week's edition of the International Cannabis Conversation. I am your host on this global tour, Chris Day, co-founder of the GCNC, and always thankful to trichomes.com for letting us take this sort of fun tour around cannabis markets across the globe. The last couple of episodes, we were in South America looking at the emerging market of Peru. And this week, I've got the pleasure of talking to Fleta Solomon from Little Green Pharma, and I checked the maps before we hopped on and realized that between where I sit here in GCNC headquarters in Denver, Colorado, and where she sits in Perth, Australia is 16,257 kilometers. So if you're ever wondering about the glories of technology, you can certainly think about how we're simultaneously able to sort of talk to each other. So welcome to the future. I'm talking to you tomorrow. And Fleta, thanks so much for joining me on the ICC.
Hi, Chris. Thank you very much for having me all the way down under. It certainly is down under, but it has its perks. But yes, you're right. It is tomorrow for you. So in the future. Yeah,
that's right. I like being able to time travel. It's kind of a cool thing. So I want to refine that so it's more controlled. But Fleta, you're the CEO of Little Green Pharma. And if anybody has been sort of tracking what's going on, not only in Australia, but also in the medicinal cannabis markets of Europe, you have to almost have heard of Little Green Pharma. That's not necessarily true for all of our audiences in North America, but it'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the origins of Little Green Pharma, and then we'll cover why you have to essentially have been under a rock for the last couple of months if you haven't at least heard the name once or twice.
No problems. Thank you very much. That was a very lovely introduction and such a pleasure to be with you today, Chris, so thank you. Yes, my name is Fleta, the Managing Director of Little Green Pharma. So we're an Australian producer. In fact, we were the first company in Australia to produce locally grown medicines for patient use, and we were the first company in Australia to then export our medicines. So our original cannabis-based medicines became available to Australian patients back in August 2018, and since then we've been helping many patients, not only in Australia but across the globe, particularly in Europe, with our high quality cannabis medicines, and that's thanks to the Australian regulatory framework that they've got in place. Now, going back just a fraction, my background is in exercise and health science, so a little bit different. But what I can tell you is that my entire career has actually been spent changing people's lives for the better. So improving people's lives. So a number of years ago, I had a workplace health company, and we would actually go out to mine sites and to oil rigs and construction sites and do behaviour-based strength conditioning programs, really to reduce employee injury and also to just create better wellness and longevity and prevent any health issues out on site. And so I've come from this background of always changing people's lives positively. And so when the opportunity came to get into medicinal cannabis, which I thought, my goodness, this is a commercial opportunity which actually has a social impact associated with it, then for me it was in the no-brainer category, jump in and do it. And that's what I did. And so the company was formed the end of 2016. 2017 was when we got our licenses, and we were the third company in Australia to get a license to grow medicinal cannabis. And then the following year, we were the first to come out with a locally grown medicine. So since then, Little Green Pharma has just been sort of growing onwards and upwards. And I'd have to say that we're the leading cannabis company in Australia, and we're very proud of where we've come from. We're proud of what we've achieved in such a small amount of time, and super proud about our vision and what's ahead of us in the future.
Yeah, I think it's great. I have watched the company quite closely, especially over the last year and a half. And I think it's a really good example of this increasing trend around conscious capitalism. The idea of making sure that by taking care of whether it's your employees or your patients in this case, and putting them first, then the rest will follow. From what I've seen, you've put in quite the science team and quite the business management team as well. What were some of the steps, I guess, you had to assemble that? Because you are publicly traded on the ASX, right? And you seem to be really sort of tearing it up lately. So what were the steps that you had to take to pull this team together?
Oh, fascinating question, because I put it down to our business model, and it's quite a unique business model I have found, particularly within the Australian medicinal cannabis industry. And it was all built around a philosophy and our vision, which was, and it always has been, to do extraordinary things for patients and to solve real patient problems. Now, when we started, and it was just me, it was an idea, and then formed, one person came to join, and then a second person, there may be a third and a fourth, and now we have 120 employees across 2 geographical locations. But at the time, coming from this health background in workplace health services, we always ran a tight ship. And it was very much about having just enough capital in the bank so that you could do the pay runs and be comfortable, but we really had to work to earn a dollar. And I think that set us up really well as a business, because we did have this cost consciousness. We have this absolute culture within the group that we have to be very careful about what we spend, and it has to be approved across a number of different layers before it goes through the system. But it actually proved to be a really great concept, and it worked for us because we had instead of a build it and they will come philosophy, we have a very different philosophy, which is let's build a little grow room, but with the capability and capacity to expand. But let's just grow a small amount of plants, make sure that we can manufacture these into a final medicine, make sure we can have patients that are using the medicines. And then once we've got great positive feedback from our patients and our doctors, then we can say as a business, we've proven that we can do this. We have a blueprint to the future. Now we can bring in some more capital and expand a little bit. And that's what we've done over the last few years. So we started small and we expanded as we needed to. And we couldn't have done that without the people and the culture that we've created at Little Green Pharma, because we all started on very low income and wages. And I can say that because just the dedication and the passion that we have within this group is quite phenomenal. They really do have the patient's interests at heart. And we're just so fortuitous in that now that we have become more successful and have generated revenue, we are listed on the ASX here in Australia, that now we can be looking after our employees more in terms of salaries, and so we do pay well, but we also expect a lot out of them because it's our patients that want to benefit. So it has been a unique business model, but one that we've really, I think we've enjoyed because we've learned a lot about ourselves. And the most remarkable finding was last year during COVID, when everybody in the industry is struggling. Everyone around the world was struggling. It was a very difficult time. And yet we've never rated so highly in an employee engagement survey that we did. And I think it was because we just came together as a family and we really understood what each other wanted and what we needed. And it was quite a surreal feeling. And I think if we were to do that same survey again right now, we probably wouldn't come out as strong. So COVID certainly had its positive outcomes from it. But it was just an issue, just something that I wanted to say in terms of culture and how that has really influenced us as a business to get to where we are and to perform.
Yeah, and as it matures and continues to grow and expand, I think we've all seen as businesses grow, right, that diligence that comes with taking care of the employees and the patients is really important, lest you lose sight of the business entirely. And I think that's probably why when it came time to take that next step, which I alluded to at the intro, which was, finding the way to acquire the necessary capital to grow and take on the new facility you bought in Denmark, people could look at the company and people could look at the resources and go, okay, well, these folks are past the irrational exuberance phase. They're making sense. They're taking care of people, and they've got a solid business model. Congratulations, by the way, on that acquisition. It's pretty spectacular to see how that came along. And for those listening who have no idea what I'm talking about, Little Green Pharma recently acquired a facility in Denmark that was previously owned by Canopy and found some pretty favorable terms. But the capacity is large, and larger than what I think some people envision possibly the demand to be. So knowing you have a pretty good decision-making team, what's the rationale that goes behind making, this kind of acquisition with both the overhead and the expanded space that currently isn't maybe being used completely?
Yeah, and here I am talking a build it and they will come philosophy versus a really tight lean business model. So Chris, the acquisition that we did in Denmark, it's a beautiful facility, my goodness, world class. It almost feels gold plated in comparison to sort of where I've come from and our facility here, which is also, really beautiful now. The facility in Denmark gave us a solution to a strategy or an issue or a problem that we'd been looking to rectify for some time. So our investors, we have a very close investor group, mainly a lot of big Australian investor names who are backing the company, but also overseas investors as well. So our strategy has always been three things. The first one is patient acquisition in Australia, because it provides immediate cash flow to the business, but also it gives us market validity for other emerging companies and industries, countries and industries that are opening up, and that's important for us. The second strategy or growth strategy point is commercial sales volumes in international markets, because this is where we're going to make the profits in international markets, purely based on a population and size game. Australia is very small, so we need to, if we want to make profits, go outside of Australia. And we're uniquely positioned with the quality of our medicines to do that into Europe. And the third point, and it's our real reason for being, and it's our main purpose, and it's a long-term strategic goal, is for drug delivery innovations to solve real patient problems. That's the R&D side of the business. It takes time. So in the meantime, we're focusing on immediate market share in these emerging markets. Now, we have done very well, particularly with our clients or our partners in Germany, to the point where we've got $5.7 million worth of sales just in Germany alone for this particular client, which is Demican, for the calendar year of 2021, sort of a run rate of about 10 million based on the orders at the end of the year. Now, we came to a position where our facility in Australia can produce 3 tonne of biomass, and that's done to EU GMP standards. Now, we're pretty much sold out of that particular facility because of our German clients. So we had an issue, clearly. Now, we either had to expand our existing facility or we needed to buy. And so we could either expand, and it was going to cost us a significant amount of money and probably a couple of years worth of timing, or there was a facility available in Denmark for almost, it was just, the commercial terms were so much more favourable, and it was instantly available now. And that's for 20 tonne of raw biomass for EU GMP. And it wasn't something that we had to wait for licensing. It was ready now, licensed, ready to go. It was already exporting to Australia, to Germany, to Czech. And it was a problem that was solved. So it just was a strategic step for Little Green Pharma, and it was a no-brainer decision in the end. We got some amazing backing from Australian investors. Gina Reinhardt, who is the country's wealthiest person, so her Hancock Prospecting, as well as some of the other amazing investing names in Australia, actually backed the raise that we did. So we purchased the facility for 20 Canadian million, and 10 of that was payable up front, 10 million in another 12 months' time. So, this is for a facility that I guess if you look at sort of the public accounts and the money and the capital spent, it would sort of be close to 70 million just to replace if anything happened to that facility. So we think that it was an excellent deal. We were the perfect fit, the perfect owner for this facility. It was only operating at about 25% capacity. That was, the previous owners, that was up to them how they ran it. Very different business model to ours. We were after EU GMP raw material, and we got it through this deal. And so now we're integrating the two teams. We're very culturally aligned in terms of our vision and our underlying passion for wanting to produce these high quality medicines for patients to use across the globe.
Congratulations again. I mean, the numbers certainly seem to make sense, and so many companies that we look at in this space are still selling a little bit of smoke and mirrors, right? Hopes and dreams, where they're really looking to the future and they're betting on a market that they're not quite sure how to enter yet. And yet you already have that, and you've got really great supply chain and great scientists, and so it seems to make sense. I am appreciative of you going into some of the detail, because so often if people just read some of the headlines, you got to study the underlying company and the underlying numbers to see how it all makes sense. So I think it's great. And the markets that you're serving already in Europe, I'm sure will continue to benefit from that. So as we sort of start to wind down the show, I wanted to ask two more questions. The first is, we know you're in Europe right now. We've talked about Australia. What other markets have you got your eye on, if any, as things continue to expand worldwide?
So our strategy is to focus on countries where cannabis is legal for medicinal purposes. And so really any country that allows that, we're very interested in. And we have a team which we're growing to ensure that we can be there at those early stages. So for us, it's about the Little Green Pharma brand. We do have these high quality medicines and we want to be known for that. So we do place a lot of importance on an early mover advantage and brand equity in an emerging market. So for example, in France, we are one of the 4 global providers that are providing medicines for the medicinal cannabis trial run by the French government. And that trial is anticipated to be the catalyst that changes legislation in the country. Now, to date, it's our products that are being prescribed, mainly because there's a lot of the CBD products, and that's what France are going with first of all. But we've sent over 7,000 units now to patients in France for that trial. So, they're taking up a lot more than what we had originally thought. We didn't realise that we would be the only supplier initially in the trial. But that's amazing for us because it means that we get that brand recognition, and particularly through the government, because if it does catalyse, then I think we're placed very well. We're strategically well positioned. And so I guess for us, it's about going into these emerging markets and having that really long-term strategic plan, even though it's at cost to us, it's costing us a lot in terms of our investment. We're not having patients paying for that product, but that is a decision that the company made purely to put ourselves in a longer-term position. So Europe is clearly very key for us, but South America is also there, very much looking into Brazil. It's quite difficult at the moment without a product authorization or sanitization. And definitely, Poland is another country, I should say, that we're working closely with as well, and we're undergoing product registration there. So, there are so many countries to speak of, but certainly as they grow, you can be sure to find Little Green Pharma somewhere in there.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to that. And I am hopeful that one of these days, as the U.S. market continues to hopefully figure itself out, that brands that have shown, great effort and responsibility worldwide get a chance to partner up with companies here as well. I always have to put a little plug in for the U.S. continuing to get its act together. So the last question, because, we've talked about the business and we've talked about what you look at for patients. You're also heavily engaged in a study in Australia called the Quest study, which is something really focused on quality of life. And some of the best interviews and companies I've talked to on this show over the last year really have focused success and growth on education and informing people on what the impact is. And Quest seems to be something that sort of fulfills that for Little Green Pharma. How is that going, and sort of what is the timing for the Quest study?
So the Quest initiative, it is, you're absolutely right, a quality of life initiative that we are running with the researchers at the University of Sydney. Now, it is ethics approved, and the purpose of the study was a couple of things. But one, there was a bit of a hole in the Australian medicinal cannabis community where it was quite difficult for patients to know where to find a doctor who was willing to prescribe cannabinoid medicines. So with the Quest initiative, it's much easier to have a sort of a website and have the University of Sydney who's able to run it and to connect patients to a doctor so that they know exactly where to go. And most of it is actually done online, as in to see if they're eligible. But I guess the most, what we love about this study is that it's not just for a particular condition. There are many people that can be eligible based on a variety of medical conditions. And just to give you an example, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, so the TGA, which is like the FDA equivalent here in Australia, have approved medicinal cannabis applications for more than 215 medical conditions. So initially, 4 years ago, they sort of suggested it was only available for a few conditions, and the typical conditions like MS and epilepsy, but they've actually approved it for so many different conditions that it goes to show where medicinal cannabis is going. And I think one of the outcomes, we're not just looking for, so if somebody has pain, for example, we're not just looking for, has this reduced your pain? We're looking for other quality of life metrics. For example, now that you're using cannabis-based medicine, has your sleeping patterns improved? What about your work? Are you working more hours? Or are you more active at the gym? Or how are your family members coping now? So we look at much more. And even to the point where we look at health metrics. So we have a health economist, industry expert who's looking at hospitalization and numbers or hours, and particularly how many hours the community spends with healthcare, because we believe that this has a very big impact as well. So the study started a few months ago. We've recruited, I think there's been over 1,000 patients already. It will continue for the foreseeable future. By the 6-month mark, we'll have some interim findings and data. Because it's ethics approved, nothing is in the dark, everything is published, so which is really great. It keeps everybody honest. And every 6 months thereafter, we will be able to produce some data which we believe will just be really valuable as evidence, hopefully, towards evidence that cannabis really does have a role to play in the medical field, and this will go a long way with the doctors and specialists, not only here in Australia, but across the globe, in showing them more evidence about the use of medicinal cannabis. So we're really excited with the study. It's going really well, and we're hoping to get a few more numbers. And the beauty of this study is that it can be rolled out overseas. It's not just restricted to Australia. So we're looking really forward to rolling that out across other countries, hopefully as well. So very exciting.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, and I love the fact that it really is transparent because, there's so many sort of bought and paid for studies that, of course, the conclusion is inevitable based on who's paying for it, what the results are going to be, right? And the transparency and nature of this approach really ensures that, yes, I think those of us in the industry are hopeful it will validate what we have seen to be true. But if there's holes in that, it'll talk to that as well. And I think that's great because that's true science and how it should be done. So congrats on that as well. I look forward to, having you back on again in the future and seeing how much further Little Green Pharma has come and continues to grow. As always, it's great to talk to you, and we'll look forward to having you again on the International Cannabis Conversation. Everybody out there in podcast land, if you haven't subscribed yet, I still, every week, do not know what you are waiting for. Hit the little subscribe button. Join us here every week as we get to talk to great people around the globe like Fleta. Fleta, thank you so much for coming on, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and definitely hit subscribe, everyone. Thanks a lot.